Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Craig Fritz. Craig, have you and I have done a podcast before, correct? It's just been like 2016.
Yeah, 2016. You hosted the Minnesota Golden Gophers podcast. Yeah. Irv Charles represent.
God.
That's claim to fame.
I think I have told the story of that game, but like I was working that day and I can only go for the first half. So I left at halftime, and on the walk from the stadium to where I lived on Allen Street, I pulled this thing out, and me and former blog member Peter Burks were in the DMs talking about who we wanted to have as like the guys on our list to replace James Franklin. And it's actually quite applicable today because Pete's number one name for that was Jeff Brom. So everything is coming a little full circle on this edition of the podcast. Of course, a little bit later, we're going to be talking about Penn State's game against Purdue. It's season opener, finally here. Warm up a beer. We're watching some Nittany Lions football this week, folks. Nick did an interview with Grant Tribbet of BigTime Boiler. You will hear that interspersed. Not totally certain where, just because of how we're recording, but it will be before we get to the predictions portion of this podcast. We'll do a little preview, then Nick and Grant's interview will be there. But before we do anything else, we want to, big day in Happy Valley. James Franklin's first game week press conference came with some really big news that Penn State's number 2 quarterback heading into the season is none other than 5-star true freshman, noted Medina battling B, Drew Allar. He will have the job as the Nittany Lions head in to West Lafayette this week, but Franklin made it a point to say it will be a thing that is determined on a week-by-week basis. So
it's happening.
Potentially it's happening. It's very important to stress, Craig, when you heard Franklin announce that, what kind of went through your head?
I was extremely surprised. And you say, like, okay, he must have made grand strides, because they were very tempered early on, saying, he was running third, fourth team. It was a battle for third. Christian Veillere at the number 2 spot locked down. So what's at play here? Like, did he just have a light switch go on? He's a 5-star recruit for a reason. Everyone knows that he has the arm talent, the foot talent, and maybe he put it together on the field and just, had this meteoric rise in the last 2 weeks of practice. Maybe something else is going on. I don't know. Like, who knows? Maybe Veillere's dinged. Maybe it's really difficult to say. Maybe he straight up won a competition. I mean, I don't want to see all this said. I don't want to see Drew Allar on the field in West Lafayette unless Penn State is absolutely cruising to victory. So
yes,
it's a big statement, but hopefully it's not something that we need to see.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I found so interesting here, number one was Franklin made it a point to say that it's not set in stone for the entire season. It's just right now, Drew Allar is Penn State's backup quarterback. I think you agree with me, Craig, that that's going to be, barring something completely unforeseen, the highest point that he is going to reach this season. I don't think either of us anticipate that. Again, barring injury, he wants to stay eligible for Social Security, whatever it is. Sean Clifford is going to be Penn State's starting quarterback from the start of the season to the end of the season.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And even if there is a big injury, it will be, like we said, it's not set in stone. Franklin hedged that it's a week-to-week kind of thing.
Yeah.
And by the time Ohio rolls around, Veillere maybe the number 2 again. So
yeah, who knows? But the one thing that Franklin did say that I think got kind of lost in all of this was when he was asked why this is the case, he said it was because of the opinions of the coaches and then data that they have accumulated. And I'm just interested, and we're not in these press conferences, we're not going to the press availabilities because I live in Ohio. Craig, you don't live in Happy Valley. None of us live in Happy Valley. I would love to know what those things are and how it can kind of be reconciled that he is the backup on a week to week basis. And also, this is based on the experience of professional collegiate football coaches and the data that they have accumulated that helped them get to this decision. I'm just interested in how those two things coincide with one another. And, it's very possible the way that they coincide is that they're not supposed to. He is going to be the second string quarterback all year, or, like you said, maybe something weird happens heading into in the week of practice heading into the Ohio week, and they decide, all right, never mind, Christian's going to be number 2 in the depth chart. Like, we just don't know what the case is.
Well, it's so fascinating when he talks about data. Like, obviously they have scrimmage data and practice data, and they all wear the activity trackers, and they obviously track the throws during practice and how they're doing, whether Drew is leading, 1s v1s or 2s v2s or 2s v1s or whatever it is in the 2-minute situation or the red zone situation. So they have all these data points, right? And is it are they tracking the wind speed and how his ball moves through the air and catchability and, all these different. So, I mean, they're a week to week, like you said, a week to week thing it's fine to say, but you already have the most intense part of practice leading into the season that has occurred. How many opportunities if this is what he's saying, how many opportunities does Vair's data have to move beyond Allar's data? And I don't know, is it a James Franklinism or is this a legit thing? So we'll see.
For sure. And then before we get into talking about the Boilers a little bit, were there any other things that really stood out to you as you were, like me, sitting on your couch and sitting on your couch or office chair, wherever you were, scrolling Twitter and seeing the things that Franklin was saying today?
Okay, so the other thing that he noted was Tyler Eldson is going to be the starting mic ahead of Kobe King, which we anticipated throughout camp, though King is going to play a lot of football. Franklin also named Barney Amore the starting punter, which sounded like there was maybe a 3-way battle with Alex Pachetta and Gabe Wosu, but Barney, recently on scholarship, handed out by Eli Manning, is going to week 1 as a starting punter. And the thing that I was like, I'm not really sure about that. He mentioned kickoffs, that it's going to be a rotating situation. And I don't know if that means each kickoff during the game is going to be a rotation, or if they're going to keep rotating at practice to see who takes the job for week 1. Oh, and he also said that Jake Pinniger would be the starting place kicker.
Yeah, I have to imagine on kickoffs that's, if you get hot, you're going to stay hot. You're not taking you out of the game thing. But that's what I have to imagine it is. But also, like, if we have a situation like, was it Pinniger 2 years ago or 3 years ago who was like really good at kicking the ball out of bounds at inopportune times? Yeah, so maybe it's like one of those situations where, like, just because I can't fathom that if Sander Sahaydak is booting the ball out of the end zone every time and preventing them from having returns and all that Gabe Wosu, or vice versa, is going to happen. So, like, they're then going to pull the dudes and then go, all right, you've done a really great job. We just want this other. Like, that would be a little weird, but
it would be weird.
Two things that stuck out. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the last thing that was of note to me, and I just thought of it now, is Franklin said they felt very comfortable with 5 wideouts in the room. We obviously know the starters are likely to be Mitchell Tinsley, and oh my God,
Parker Washington,
Keandre Lambert-Smith. And so then you have assume Malik Mega and Trey Wallace are the 4th and 5th guys. And so is it Caden Saunders? Is it Liam Clifford? Is it Jaden Dotton? Is it someone, that hasn't really been talked about? Because they said basically they want to, when it gets into a tempo situation, that those 6 guys are important, so the starters can tap out when they need a blow, and someone else can come in and fill in those shoes. So,
yeah, I mean, Kind of going along those lines, something I thought was really important that Franklin mentioned was that they want to have on offense a 2 deep at every single position, and that they're close to getting their wide receivers kind of the position where they specifically need that. But Franklin spoke a lot about roster depth. The quote that he gave during the press conference, I think we've been in a much more similar role than we've been in terms of depth. We've got much more depth than we've had in the previous 2 years for a number of reasons. I think depth breeds competition. I think competition, as long as it is done well, and I think Franklin generally handles competition well, is a really good thing. I think having options is a good thing. It lets you kind of, let's say you have a situation where it's Tyler Elsdon and Kobe King battling for that middle linebacker role. You can say, Tyler doesn't have it today. Kobe has it today. We're just going to roll with Kobe. But also, if Kobe doesn't have it the following week, we can go with Tyler and just constantly be in one of those situations where if a guy's just not on their game that day, you can go to someone else. And I think that's really important, especially because, you think of, say, the wide receiver room. Penn State has 2 guys who seem like they are legitimate difference makers, a couple of guys who could be that, and then it's just about finding the rest. Running back, you have a number of options there. Offensive line, number of options there. Defensive line doesn't really have the kind of superstar guys that we know of, but they have so many bites at the apple that you can, mix and match depending on the game. So I thought that was important. The other thing I thought was important was Franklin continues to talk about the offensive line and its success. He's being very tempered in it, very tempered in how he's discussing them, but he's spoken a lot, and I find this very interesting, Craig, in the ability of the running backs and what the running backs can potentially do and how that will help the offensive line. So you look at one of the, tweets from Onward State's sports account. Franklin was talking about ways to help the offensive line succeed. And he said, one of the big ones is the investment in the running game. With the 2 freshmen, they've shown so far that they can help with that, to take pressure off the passing game. It seems like the thing with the offensive line this year is that it is going to be better, or it can be better, in part because it has these 2 freshmen, Fat Man Allen, who Franklin said was one of the surprises of camp, and Nick Singleton, who is a ginormous talent, coming in and taking a little bit of pressure off of them. So you don't have a situation where it's a guy like Kayvon Lee, who isn't the most decisive guy, a guy like Devin Ford, who is a nice player but kind of lacks that next gear. I don't know about you, but when he's talking about the offensive line, and again, he's taking that pressure off by not talking about them, but he is talking about the talent they have in the running back room, particularly with these 2 true freshmen. Like, that gets me excited.
Definitely. I mean, for sure. Like, you can go back to, like, say, Journey Brown, and whose career was unfortunately cut short due to a heart issue. Was that line superior to the line that we've had over the last 2 years? Or was Journey Brown more adept at finding a hole, hitting the 3rd gear, getting to the 2nd level, carrying tacklers, being tough to take down? I mean, you could even go back to Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders. When the talent at running back has been blue chip exemplary, Penn State has succeeded with, let's be honest, mediocre offensive line. Obviously, you have Saquon got stuffed numerous times, but then also using his talent was able to turn nothing into 80-yard runs, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously the talent at tailback makes a big difference. And like you said, it can take pressure off that offensive line. If someone misses a block, it's not going to necessarily kill the play 10 times out of 10 like it did last year, or seemed to last year. If, Singleton has the wiggle to get past an unblocked defender and get to the outside or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so often when we talk about the running game and we talk about running backs, not just for Penn State and football in general, it is the talent that you have in your running back room won't really matter if your offensive line can't block anyone. It also kind of works the other way. Your offensive line is going to look worse if a running back can't make one guy miss. And I think Penn State has really lacked that since Journey Brown had to leave the program a little bit earlier than he would have liked. And as a result, we've seen a couple of really rough years. I think that has potential to change in a big way. I think the Purdue game is a potential first step towards that. We're going to talk about that Purdue game in a second, but first we want to take some time to thank the sponsor of this podcast, Home Field Apparel. They're Pod's newest sponsor. If you are a college sports fan, if you're a college sports fan with an internet connection, if you are not that and you found this podcast, please reach out to me because I want to know how the hell you did that. But if you are a college sports fan on the internet, you are almost certainly aware of Home Field Apparel. If you haven't seen them yet, Home Field is a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis. That last part's important. If you are an Indianapolis Colts fan who listens to this podcast, they just branched out and did some absolutely incredible Colts gear this week. That jacket in particular.
Fancy.
The shirts are comfortable. They're unique. While I'm saying this, Craig is going to model the one that he has on.
Here we go. Once
Penn
more.
State selection.
We are.
I wore that one around Columbus the other day. It's a very nice shirt. But
it's very brash and bold. I like it.
They take the time to make sure that the things that they put on their merchandise make you feel closer to your school. Just going through Home Field Apparel, their website, and looking at the t-shirts, you can see these designs are cool, they are unique, and they really are special in the sorts of things that they put the work in to make sure it's not something you can get from a knockoff third-party site or somebody else that's already making gear for a school. They had their promo Big New Saturday where they would announce new schools and drop big merch lines for them. Penn State, proud to say, won it because Penn State fans are both incredibly online and love the gear. There are 15 pieces of apparel in all in the collection. And if you are a new customer, whether you're buying Penn State gear, whether you're buying gear for another school, use the promo code ROARLIONSROAR, one word, all uppercase, to get 15% off of your first order. Again, if you are a new customer to Home Field Apparel, use the promo code ROARLIONSROAR, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Thank you to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this podcast. Let's talk about the Purdue Boilermakers.
Let's do it.
Purdue last year went 9-4, 6-3 in conference play. They won the Music City Bowl over Tennessee in a really entertaining football game. Ended the year 35th in SP+, 44th offensively, 25th defensively, and 107th in special teams. Entering this year, they are 34th in preseason SP+, 45th offensively, 32nd defensively. The game kicks off at 8 p.m. on Fox, and we got their A crew folks in Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, and I believe Gus calls her the All-American girl, Jenny Taft. I mean, before we even talk about the game itself, Craig, I think you are like me and all of our other friends, and when last Penn State football season ended, just needed a little break.
Need a break.
Step away. Just get a little distance between myself and beloved alma mater football program. But as we've gotten closer, once it hit 8 p.m. last Thursday, ever since then, I have just been fired up. I cannot wait for this football game. What about yourself?
Oh man, like every year, it's to me, it's better than Christmas. There's so much that changed. I love the roster management aspect. The recruiting's been fantastic, and we're just ready to see some Nittany Lions get out there and smack around some Boilermakers, score some points, score some touchdowns, get into this offense, and just get after it.
Yes, it should be a really entertaining football game. I mean, Jeff Brom has built up a really impressive thing out there in West Lafayette. Brom's a guy who's been linked to a million different jobs, it seems like, over the years. Somehow has not left for any of them, particularly Louisville, which for some reason hasn't just given him whatever they want to be his head coach. But in his time at Purdue since taking over in 2017, a 28-29 record and a 20-22 mark in conference play, but that really is bogged down by 1-4-8 campaign. Again, last year, very, very respectable football team that he's put together out there. Craig, let's just start with two quick questions before we get into Nick's interview with Grant Tribbet of BigTime Boiler, which is, what is the thing that you are keeping your eye on in this game when Penn State has the football?
I mean, we really touched on it, right? I want to see a competent running game that can move the ball forward and highlights the talent that we've all talked about Franklin being an ace recruiter. They've got these guys. We want to see them deployed, right? And I mean, I'm fascinated on offense specifically. Mitchell Tinsley had a ridiculous statistical season at Western Kentucky last year, comes in as a grad transfer, and I'm not expecting him to go for 88 catches and, whatever he had down there. That was just insane. But I want to see if he's the real deal next to Parker Washington, who might be my favorite Penn State wide receiver in 20 years.
Really?
Here's the thing, and I talked to Nick about this previously. Parker's not a huge dude. I'm not a huge dude. So for me to project someone that is kind of my size doing the things that he does with his catch radius and his cut ability and his ability to take on contact and still get positive yards, it's a joy to watch. I love watching him. His route running is awesome. So let's go Parker. And it's sad I couldn't even remember his name earlier when we were going through the starting wideouts. But, I have 4 kids and I'm very tired. So
it's okay. I mean, the interesting thing for me is that Purdue's defense brings back 8 starters, but they lost, I would argue, the 3 best players from its defense. Obviously lost George Karlaftis, their gigantic defensive end. I went in either the first or the second, I believe the first round of the draft. The Kansas City Chiefs was a blue chip recruit, had 4.5 sacks for them last season, led the team in forced fumbles and fumble recovery. Just a really big, nasty physical presence along their defensive line. They also lost their top tackler, Jalen Alexander, 113 tackles, 1 sack, 5 pass deflections to the NFL, and their second most productive tackler, safety by the name of Marvin Grant, transferred to Kansas, 76 tackles on the season. But otherwise, they bring back everyone from a defense that wasn't that bad last season. Purdue, middle of the road in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed per game, had a they were 3rd in the Big Ten in passing yards allowed per game, and were actually 5th in the Big Ten yards allowed per game, scoring right there in the middle of the pack between Iowa and Ohio State. One thing that Jeff Brom's teams have been really good at on the defensive side of the ball over the years is they're an aggressive bunch. They have always really tried to go for havoc plays. A really nasty and physical defense. I know they're replacing their defensive coordinator with a guy by the name of David Elsden. I believe he's coming in as a team's defensive coordinator. You'll hear a little bit more of that with Nick and Grant next, a little bit after this. But I think if you're Penn State, this is a really good way, kind of like I think how the Wisconsin game last year forced them to be ready quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think last year going into Camp Randall, obviously Wisconsin learned right before the game they weren't going to have probably their best player in linebacker, Leo Chenal, but Penn State had to get ready quickly. They had to have their best stuff right from the jump because of where they were going. Obviously, this Purdue defense is not as good as Wisconsin's defense last year, but it is still one with impact players on that side of the football. They have a linebacker in Kieran Douglas, who is a really talented and athletic linebacker. Kydron Jenkins led the team with 5 sacks last season. Cam Allen is a really talented safety, and they have a cornerback in Jamari Brown, who I think is going to be a really interesting test, as he is 6'3", 205 pounds, a really big, physical, solid dude. So I want to see if Penn State's going to be able to come out, again, like they did last year against Wisconsin. Well, I'll amend that a bit, where against Wisconsin, they were just thrown right into the fire, and they got burnt a little bit early on, but they did eventually start to figure some things out. Let's move to the other side of the ball, Craig. This is Jeff Brom's specialty. When Purdue has the ball, what are you keeping an eye on?
It's so interesting because, Penn State, we talk about this depth at defensive line, a lot of guys that have experience. We talk about how ridiculous the secondary can be, cornerback and safety, just athletes everywhere. A lot of questions at linebacker. We do have to remember that Penn State lost 7 of its top 10 tacklers from a year ago. So there's opportunity all over the field, but we know that PJ's back in the middle, right? I'm interested to see the kind of production that we get out of the defensive ends, because I feel like defensive tackle is just known quantities. We know that the second string have a ton of experience in Izzard and Devon Ellis. So can those ends get to the quarterback? Because Aiden O'Connell will pick you apart, deep balls, intermediate routes. He has a great arm, but he's not the most mobile guy. If you go to their 2021 stats, rushing, which is going to be accounting for most of our sacks, he had negative 120 rushing yards. So he got, he doesn't run, right? So need to keep him in the pocket and get after it, and then see if the secondary can hold up. I'm just not sure about the linebackers. They are replacing a lot of dudes, but I feel like there's a lot of talent. So I'm interested to see what those defensive ends can do to really set the tone in West Lafayette.
Well, the thing with me and Purdue's going up against this Purdue offense is, yes, O'Connell is a really nice quarterback. He ended up winning their starting quarterback job last season. He actually didn't go into the year as the starter. Jack Plummer was the starter, but he kind of wrested it away from him. 3,700 yards, 72% completion, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. A very productive player and someone who really seems to understand what he needs to do in Purdue's offense. The interesting thing about Purdue to me is, one, last year they could not run the ball at all. For how bad Penn State's rushing offense was last year, Penn State was second to last in the Big Ten with 107.8 yards, rushing yards per game. Purdue somehow had 23 fewer yards per game. They could not run the ball to save their lives. And they're bringing back King Caraway, who has played a ton of football for them. If memory serves, he was the running back in that famous game where they kicked the hell out of number 2 Ohio State with Rondale Moore a few years ago. 3.9 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns there. Xander Horvath, their fullback, 3.5 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. Dylan Downing, another guy who played running back for Horvath has since moved on to the NFL, but still that yards per carry is basically what happens up and down this roster. Downing, 4 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. They are not a team that runs the football effectively, really at all. The other thing with them is their top 3 pass catchers are all gone. David Bell was a marvel last year, 93 receptions, nearly 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns. He is on the Cleveland Browns. Milton Wright, not with the team. Jackson Anthrop, not gone. So they have to go with Payne Durham, a really talented tight end, 467 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. Their number 1 receiver they're bringing back is Brock Thompson, who's a good player, missed some practice time during the offseason. He has surgery to have rods inserted into each shin in the offseason. It's all about health with him. And then they're relying very heavily on Tyrone Tracy, a transfer coming in from Iowa, basically hoping that his 15 catches and 106 yards and 1 touchdown were a function of playing for Iowa. So for me, I think this Purdue offense is dangerous. I think their scheme is very good. I think their quarterback is very good. But they're coming into this game looking for answers, and they're going to need to look for answers, namely in the passing game. They know what they have in the running game, and it's a matter of getting that cooking. But in the passing game, they need to find guys to catch the football. And they are doing that against what is, to a man, probably the strongest unit on Penn State's defense in this secondary. And that's really where a lot of my confidence in this game comes from. I think Purdue, especially on a home field that should be absolutely rocking, could put up some numbers in the passing game. But I just think Penn State's secondary going up against a generally unproven receiving core is something that it's the thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on the most as we, as this game happens. But neither of us are experts on Purdue football. Instead, Nick went out and found an expert on Purdue football, Grant Tribbet of Big Time Boiler. We're going to get out of the way. Next thing that you're going to hear is Nick talking to Grant. Nick, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Nick Pollock of Roar Lions Roar. Of course, you know me, but you probably do not know Mr. Grant Tribbet of Big Game Boiler. I just did a preview for this Penn State Purdue game over there on his website with him. I guess that was last week. Now he's returning the favor. Come over here and going to tell us a little bit about Purdue. So first, Grant, you want to go ahead and say what's up and plug your site for us? Plug your YouTube channel, that is?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? Happy to be here, Nick. Just started a YouTube channel many years ago, just as a highlight kind of thing back in the day. But here recently, noticed that there wasn't much Purdue representation out there, so decided to make just a YouTube channel at the Big Time Boiler. And just kind of made a few reaction videos, and I know you and I just made one, and it's doing pretty well right now. I think it's almost up to 3,000 views, so
awesome.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome to hear. Yeah. We were talking, every time we are planning kind of game week content, we always think, who can we have on from the opposing school to tell us about what's going on. We realized we didn't really know any Purdue people. So really happy to have you on and kind of have you join our rotation of team specialists. So as it may be. I think just the first question I have for you is, Purdue has been a team over the last, however many years since Brom got there, where they've obviously had these, incredible moments of brilliance, especially, you don't want to be a number 2 team coming into Purdue. Like you don't want that. Like we've seen them do some pretty amazing and special things. We've seen them have some truly, truly standout players. So I just kind of want to get your sense is what's just the general pulse of the fan base right now? Like, are fans generally happy with the direction things are going? Is there, some sort of sense that things could be better and they're not? Just what's the general, where's the fan base at right now?
Well, honestly, I think as the Purdue fan base is pretty ecstatic. Historically, this is a 500 program. We were doing pretty good in Joe Tiller years, and I think some of the fan base got a little spoiled, and they soon realized how bad it can be with Daryl Hazel and Danny Hope. So I think also, true Purdue fans know, at least the diehards, and I think your basic Purdue fan realizes what a mess Jeff Brom inherited. And there was, publications the last couple of years that had Jeff Brom on the hot seat, which was an absolute joke. Knowing what Brom inherited and knowing kind of actually we've had kind of the opposite of what you guys had in 21 and 20, we had in 19 and 20 with the injuries and then COVID being COVID and all that craziness. Yeah. But the Purdue fan base is very excited. We're super happy to have Jeff Brom. Hope we can keep him. And we all believe that he's doing the things the right way, and he's built this program up the right way and has the depth now that he hasn't had in the past.
I think a lot of fans, I know it's something that as on the outside looking in, we're kind of surprised, honestly, that the Jeff Brom's still there. Like, no knock on Purdue. Like it seems like a well-run and, it seems like a fun program to be a part of, but it seemed like he was kind of on the fast track to hop up to, a really premier job. Are you guys surprised that he's still there?
A little bit, Louisville is always Jeff Brom, he kind of beats to, his own drum a little bit. He kind of likes the, different unique atmospheres, but Louisville was obviously the player that was, that always loomed large, them being basically the Brom family being first sons of Louisville. And, it just so happened that job opened up, year 2, right after year 2 he completed, and Louisville opened up with Paterno. And, I think most of it thought, he was good at, he was gone, but he surprised us kind of all and, turned it down, and he's a loyal guy. And, right now it's somewhat surprising, but not really. Purdue isn't like basketball. Purdue's a pretty sneaky good school. The expectations aren't exactly sky high, kind of with Joe Tiller. There's no reason why Purdue can't be a Wisconsin type program if they, or Minnesota or somewhere like that, if they continue to do well. And again, you're not going to get fired for going, 8-4 every year, like maybe you would some other places.
Yeah, totally.
Hell, you go 8-4 every year. We might build you a statue.
Yeah, it's I think other Big Ten West teams would probably disagree, but as a team, Penn State only plays Purdue every once in a while. I love that Jeff Brom is at Purdue, and I love what he's done just because it's so different from what at least the rest of the Big Ten West does. Like, they're not this get 1,000 pounds of linemen on the line and just run straight at you. Like, they do different stuff, and it's just so much more interesting to watch. I adore what Jeff Brom has done at Purdue. It's been really fun to watch, and I imagine that it's been equally as fun for you.
Oh yeah, especially coming off the Hazel Airs, wasn't hard but he brings an excellent brand of football, and one that us Purdue fans, especially myself, grew up watching with Drew Brees and Kyle Orton and the Joe Tiller year, basketball and grass. So he kind of returned it to our roots. So we're loving it, no question.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure you are. So as we look towards this year's team specifically, I want to focus on the offense first. Elephant in the room, no more David Bell. Bummer for you. Very thankful on my side that David Bell is not there anymore. So, obviously with him gone, what's the offense looking like going into this season? Obviously Aiden O'Connell, stud, maybe the second best quarterback in the conference after CJ Stroud. But where's the kind of feeling and where's the confidence level on the offense right now?
Well, I think the confidence level is actually pretty high, and if your viewers and Penn State fans in general want a good preview of what this Purdue team looks like, really they can just go to YouTube and watch the Music City Bowl against Tennessee. I mean, honestly, that Purdue team that played against Tennessee pretty much is returning. I think 18 starters, something like that, and that game was played with no David Bell or Milton Wright, who was supposed to be the heir apparent to David Bell, who was actively ineligible for that bowl game. So the only receiver really that stepped up in that game that we didn't have is Jackson Anthrop. But I think O'Connell threw for 455 and 5 touchdowns. So I think it's this offense is built to receive. And honestly, we've been doing this for every year since Jeff Brom's been here, even with some I don't want to say bums, but some lower talented players out there. This system's made them look good. And I kind of said this on another video, and it kind of going to sound ridiculous, but when you have a good system, kind of like a Drew Brees or a Tom Brady, sometimes those quarterbacks make the receivers. And in this offense with a quarterback like O'Connell, that's extremely accurate, and only, he's way not even close to Brady or Brees, but he's accurate like a Brady or Brees. Sure. When you have a quarterback that can put the ball exactly where it needs to be, sometimes, you can have a Julian Edelman or Amendola that would be terrible on some other team, look like an absolute stud in your system. So I think we kind of have that going on here. With some of these receivers. That's why there's hope. Obviously, Brock Thompson, who had 200 yards in the bowl game, is back, and that was on 2 bad legs, which he had off-season surgery for. He should be good to go. We brought in some Iowa talented receivers that Iowa didn't know how to use in that system, who appear to be blowing people away in camp, so that should be interesting.
Iowa not knowing how to use receivers? Yeah. What do you mean? I don't understand.
Yeah, with Charlie Jones and Tracy, but and Purdue's actually recruited very well at their wide receiver position. There's been a ton of depth there. I think there's legitimately 10 or 11 guys that are very good players that can step up. So there's obviously a lot of question marks. What this passing game is going to be, but the most important thing is to have an accurate quarterback and a good quarterback, and we have that at least checked off the boxes and players. So looking to see how that all kind of molds. I think I alluded to you. Obviously, Penn State's strength seems to be the secondary, so I'm not exactly thrilled. This is our first test, getting all those guys together in the same on the field together. But hey, at least it's at our place, and we'll see what happens. But I guess you were asking about the offense in general, right? Not just the passing game.
Yeah. Go ahead, riff away.
Yeah. And then we got the running game, which has obviously been our struggle, which is a little bit skewed because Purdue honestly doesn't like to, they don't want to run the ball, but they've needed to in the past and been unable to do it when, trying to get some leads and extending leads and stuff like that and trying to get out the game. But I don't know if you hear my kids or not, they're yelling outside. But sorry about that. Anyway.
School's starting everywhere. There's children in chaos all over the place. It's fine.
Yeah, this is the first video in the home office as well. Usually I'm on the road.
It looks good, though.
Anyway, back to the offense. Obviously O'Connell, he is the offense. Running back should be improved with the offensive line back. 4 starters returning from the bowl game. Offensive line is, again, looking to be good. Much better than it was the last couple of years. They had a pretty good, stinky good year last year, though, as well. But running back, you got King Daru back there. He is what it is. He's a decent back, probably lower level Big Ten, if we're being honest. But they got some decent backups. So, we're not trying to run for 200 yards a game. If Purdue can get over 100 yards rushing, I hard to see Purdue losing with that offensive passing attack.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's. I think I'm glad that you again mentioned the maybe uneasiness on your side of knowing that you have to go against Penn State secondary in the first week, and I as a Penn State fan, you're right. It gives me comfort knowing that our strength is probably the thing that matches up against your strength, but it's also like, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Like Aiden O'Connell, I truly do believe Aiden O'Connell is the second best quarterback in the Big Ten, and even if Penn State secondary does perform as well as we're expecting it to, there's only so much you can do against elite signal callers who have elite level accuracy. Like, I'd much rather face a dude with a big arm that, is only completing 50% of his passes than somebody who's, maybe not going to do too much field stretching, but on 3rd and 6, he's going to hit his target in the chest and he's not going to let a ball bounce away into a defensive back's hand. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch those two units match up, and it's a little unnerving as a Penn State fan knowing that we're going to have to go against that in week 1. So flipping over to the defensive side now, similar to David Bell, you lose the big horse in George Karlaftis, who is just an absolute monster. As a Seahawks fan, I was really hoping they were going to take him. Unfortunately, they did not, but win some, you lose some. But where's, same question, where's the defense at going into 2022?
Defense looking pretty good. They returned most of their starters. I mean, George obviously is a huge loss. A guy you're not going to replace from a one versus one, kind of replacement. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get that production. But, if you asked a trivia question, who was Purdue's leading sack leader, last year, I guarantee you, non-Purdue fans or even Purdue fans alike 95% would get it wrong. It was not George Karlaftis. It was Kaiser Jenkins who's coming back, who was helped with, with George getting double team and all that. But that's what they're going to miss the most. They're going to miss George drawing the complete attention of the defense. The good news is they have some studs on the D-line who are improving every year, and they got a great D-line coach. For the first time in my memory, Purdue can go 2 or 3 deep on the defensive line. They have a great D tackle in Branson Dean, very solid partner in Lawrence Johnson. Ends, they're kind of relying on, again, Jenkins will be back, a lot of other ends like Scotty Humphrich to transfer to come in, step up, kind of take George's place, but they're going to do it by committee. We do have a stud freshman that just came in, Nick Caraway, that absolutely blew up towards the end of the ranking cycle, where he just came out of nowhere to be a 4-star and at the under All-American game and was turning heads left and right. So he's wearing number 5. So we're hoping maybe he can get some George Karlaftis magic, but he'll probably be like a 3rd down pass specialist. We'll see there. But other, linebacker Jalen Graham, who's listed sometimes as a safety, listed sometimes as a linebacker, depending on where you look at it. But really, Purdue kind of runs this weird 4-2-5, but really it's like a 4-3. He's just a weak side linebacker, but he can also drop in a nickel if he needs to. But he's an absolute stud. He's probably one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten, if we're being honest. Just a freak athlete, former quarterback, runs insanely fast. He's one of those guys that's probably going to go to the combine next year and absolutely just blow people away with his numbers. He kind of reminds you of the guy from Michigan that used to be a linebacker that was all over the field, and I can't remember his name. Trying me nuts.
Khalil Hudson.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, it could be it, but he's kind of one of those freaky hybrid linebackers. But linebacker looks to be pretty solid. They got a 6-year and a 7th-year guy back there in Douglas and I'm going to say his name wrong. Let's just call him Simi. Fesaseki is his name from Cali, but he was injured last year. He came back, so very, very old, mature group back there. Secondary should pretty solid as long as those guys can stay healthy. They've been a little banged up. Corey Trice, who's an NFL-type corner, was hurt all last year pretty much. He's supposed to be back to 100% for this game. Jabari Brown, another solid, good-sized corner, too. I think Trice is at 6'3", and Brown's like 6'1". So, and some pretty good safeties in Jefferson and Cam Allen, who led the team in interception. So, overall, This defense, again, sneaky top 35 defense last year, a good scoring defense. We do replace our defensive coordinator, but we had 3 coordinators last year. It's kind of different, but we do lose our play caller who went to Wake Forest, but should be the same system. Jeff Brom really put his fingerprints on this defense after he fired the disaster that was Bob Diaco. He got more involved in the defense, and yeah, that was terrible. To go with COVID, it did not go well. But so I should not pretty much will be the same defensive run as last year. Just might be some wrinkles with play calling, obviously, since it's a different play caller. But overall, and again, I think an above average unit, and that's all they need to be, really. If they can beat an above average defense with that offense, considering if they can take the step and be as good or close to what they were last year, all you need is above average defense, and you should be pretty good.
Yeah, totally. It sounds to me like you are feeling pretty good about this upcoming season overall. Is that fair?
Very fair. Very fair. I mean, this upcoming season, obviously this Penn State game might be the toughest game of the year. If we beat Penn State on Thursday, which we very well could, but we also could very well lose to it. I see no reason why Purdue, with that schedule, can't win 9 to 10 games and get to Indy. Probably we need 10 wins to get to Indy, but if this is the year, if they're going to have, if it's going to happen, this needs to be the year, especially with all probably the incoming changes and everything else. But this schedule, this basically is the exact same schedule that Iowa had last year. Not considering non-conference, but we have a very, very weak non-conference. We got to go to Syracuse. It's not terrible. It's in a dome, which is for our offense it's perfect. But we play Maryland, we play IU, and then we play you. So same 3 crossovers they had last year too, and they won 10 games. And in my opinion, this is much a better Purdue team than Iowa had last year with that putrid offense. But not quite the defense they have. But I'm feeling pretty good with this team. Again, I think a lot's and it's not going to be the end of the world. If we do lose to you, I still think it's going to be a pretty decent year for Purdue standards. An 8 to 9 win season still on the table.
I'm curious, as like we talked about before briefly, how different Purdue is from the other teams on that side of the conference, and really arguably from every team in the conference. I mean, I guess they're not totally dissimilar from like Maryland's play style offensively, maybe somewhat similar to Ohio State. All teams like to air it out a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, does that, just knowing that there is nobody else in the West that's really like Purdue, is it a comfort knowing that, or is it, kind of like going into every season, do you kind of worry about just the body blow after body blow of facing basically 5 carbon copy teams of each other every single year in Wisconsin? I mean, they're all doing the same thing. I'm just curious if it's enjoyable knowing that you're kind of the unicorn of the group, or does it get tiresome at times?
No, I like it. I like passing the ball, and it's kind of why I think the defense is improving too. And Jeff Brom again has his handprints on it. I think they realize they know what they have to do, and they've been recruiting the hell out of the DL, the defensive line. And they're like, guys, all we got to do is stop the run, basically, make these guys pass against us, and then have an offense that they're not used to seeing every week. And I think the recipe for success there is pretty good. And, we'll see if Jeff Brom can sustain it, but that's how he's recruiting to it right now. So I like it. Again, I think we're kind of that very, very poor man's Ohio State, and I guess maybe a better version of Maryland as far as, teams like to dish it out and don't want, not trying to run the ball down their throats. But I know Jeff Brom does, at least he alludes to in, his press conferences and his talks that, he wants to be a little more balanced, which needs to happen, and that's how his teams were at Western Kentucky too. So if we can get that, a little bit more balance, running the ball and able to run the ball with this high level passing attack, I think that's ultimately going to be the best. But yeah, hopefully, which I don't think is going to be the case, but I'm glad that we're an air raid team, if you will, rather than a Minnesota or Northwestern just pound it and throw the ball 3 yards out every time.
Sure,
it'd drive me nuts on Saturday.
All right. Well, now it's time for the important question then. What's your prediction for Thursday's game? I almost said Saturday's game. It's not registering in my brain that it's on Thursday yet. But what's your official prediction for the game?
I think it's going to be a close game. I really do. It's been fun seeing some of your Penn State sites, seeing the predictions. a lot of overconfident takes there, I think. But I mean, you guys are you're Penn State. I think you probably do have a little more talent. I think though people are underestimating the talent Purdue actually has just through the recruiting. They got 2 top 25 recruiting classes a few years ago, which those guys are now juniors and seniors. They brought in some quality. They've been bringing in quality grad transfers and not just grad transfers, transfer portal additions the last couple of years too. So they got a pretty sneaky good team. And again, if you really want to watch them, go check out that Tennessee Music City Bowl, and that's kind of what you're getting with some upgrades. But if this game was at Penn State, I would be very hard pressed to pick Purdue. I'd probably pick Penn State by at least a touchdown. But being that it's on a Thursday night, first game of the year, a lot of these, both teams have some question marks. I just got to give the edge to Purdue being at home, and I think with this passing attack, and I think their defense is good enough to give Penn State some issues at least early on. I got Purdue by 3 points, 27-30, I think is what I said. But again, nothing in this game would surprise me. I would be surprised if either team blew each other out. I think Penn State probably would have the opportunity to do that more than we would. But yeah, I think it should be a pretty close game. And honestly, it's almost a coin flip game in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I guess the fact that it's the first game of the year gives me a little more comfort than if this was like a week 3 Thursday or Friday game, I would be truly terrified. But the fact that it's week 1 and knowing that everybody had the same amount of time to prepare for it, and it's, it maybe feels off schedule, but you've known about it for a while. It gives me a little more comfort as a Penn State fan going into what, is like you meant, it's going to be a really difficult road game. It is not the game I would choose to start the season for sure. It's not a comfortable situation. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing I think is going to loom large in this game too is special teams play. I really do. And that's one advantage Purdue also has too, is we return, our punter, who was not very good last year, but he was coming from Australia, and I think he got better as the year went on. I think he should be decent. And our field goal kicker is very good. And then we also obviously get Charlie Jones, the return of the year last year. So special teams, for Purdue is looking pretty good. I think, 4 starters, if you will. And we also return the holder and the long snapper. So, that could loom large as well. I don't know. I think Penn State has a few questions there too. So it's question marks abound, both places. It's going to be a good game, I think.
Yeah, before we get out of here, I do have to unfortunately share the news. I know when I was on your podcast, I was telling you about our 6'6" punter, Gabe Wosu. Unfortunately, did not win the job. Barney Amore will be punting instead, so we will probably not get to see him on the field.
I was very disappointed to hear James say that in his press conference.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, maybe he'll get on. Maybe they'll do a little week 1 type thing where they alternate back and forth still. Who knows? But hey, Grant, really appreciate you hopping on here, giving us the inside scoop on Purdue. Like I said, we'll definitely have you back, whether it be this season, hopefully for a Big Ten championship preview. But if not, then definitely year after, and definitely year after, and in the years ahead. So really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nick, for that, and thank you, Grant, for taking some time to give Penn State fans a little bit more of a glimpse into what we can expect out of the Boilermakers this season and in this game. Craig, I think it is time that you and me pick some winners in this one. Penn State.
Yeah, buddy.
Thursday night, 8 p.m. kick at Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette. Game is on Fox. Our friends out in the desert think Penn State is a 3.5-point favorite. ESPN's FPI has it about 60-40 that Penn State wins. We're recording this before Bill Connolly puts out his SP Plus projection, so we are not going to be able to have that. But looking at this right here, spread of 3.5, over under of 53.5. I'm really bad at math. I shouldn't be doing this on the fly. I think that assumes something like, 28 to 25, something in that area for Penn State. How does that sound? What do you think about that line. What do you think is going to happen in this game? And who are the Penn State players who you think are going to, or what are the matchups, Penn State versus Purdue, that you think are going to decide this one?
Okay, so first of all, I think Penn State's going to win. I think Penn State is going to cover. I think it's going to hit the over. I think the matchups that are most critical, when Purdue has the ball, got to cover the tight end. Because I don't, just not to be remiss, I want to say that they're starting 2 transfers from Iowa. Charlie Jones, return specialist for Iowa, who also had like 300 some yards receiving last year. Like you said, there's just not a lot that scares you with the Purdue wideouts. But again, they're Brome wideouts. They're going to be ready to play. I just don't know that the level is up to, the talent that Penn State has in the secondary. I'm very interested to see Penn State be able to either stay in a base or go to nickel and not have to bring in a 6th cornerback to cover these guys and give Purdue a glimmer of hope in the run game. And then on the other side, I really want to see a freshman running back break something, 20, 30 yards, just to give them a taste of college football, get this offense moving, make it more than Clifford to Parker Washington. We had situations last year when it felt like if Jahan Dotson wasn't on the field or didn't get open, that there was no hope for Penn State to pick up a crucial 3rd or 4th down. And I'm really hoping that we can get some new options in those types of critical moments available.
So good news. Last time Purdue, from what I could tell, was a 3.5. Well, yeah, last time Purdue was a home dog. They beat the hell out of Michigan State 40-29. So not cool, but they were also a 3.5 point home dog against Wisconsin last year and lost 30-13. Here's the real not fun one. The last time Penn State was a road favorite last year against Michigan State, they, by the exact same spread, 3.5 points, of course, lost that game 30-27. But it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling pretty good. So I think Penn State is going to win this game. I'm inclined to say the under hits. It's basically just comes down to the fact that you think about early season college football games. It's very rare that teams are up and humming right from the jump. So I think I do like Penn State to cover, but I like them covering by something like 27-21, something in that ballpark. And when I think of who's going to decide this game, it's very reductive to just say the quarterback battle, but I think Sean Clifford has to be able to go into this game. And you look at Penn State's offensive line, brand new left tackle. The center was playing guard last year, got a little bit of run at center. The right guard didn't play at all last season. The running backs either disappointed or weren't with the team last year. The wide receivers, it is a guy who is new. For all intents and purposes, it's a guy who was new in the program in Mitchell Tinsley, and then 2 guys in Parker Washington and Keandre Lambert-Smith who are going to be taking on bigger roles. And the tight ends are a bunch of guys who, came into last year with a ton of hype, but to say it frankly, they disappointed last year. So when you look at that, I think the one guy that they have to lean on, not just for his performance, but for his ability, is kind of look at everyone, tell them, guys, take that extra deep breath, stay composed. My understanding of the offense is going to help us against a really tricky Purdue defense is going to be Sean Clifford. And then you look on the other side for Purdue, what we've mentioned of a lot of new pass catchers coming in, a new, a running game that was not particularly good last year. They're going to need Aiden O'Connell to win them this football game. And I think if Sean Clifford is able to keep Penn State's offense, calm, composed, settle down, if he doesn't get sped up, which has been a constant concern of mine with him, if he's able to just be, calm, relax, He's not throwing the ball a little bit quicker than he's normally supposed to. He's not taking off a little bit quicker than he's supposed to. I think Penn State wins this game. I think that's going to happen. Give me Nittany Lions something like 27-21. Craig, I think it's time to end this episode of the podcast. Are there any final things you want to say? Whether it's about Penn State, whether it's about any other Purdue, any other team in the Big Ten, just anything. Ain't got anything you want to get off your chest right now?
Just looking at this depth chart, Purdue on defense, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt sophomore, transfer. These are grad transfers, senior, grad transfer, senior transfer. So there's a lot of experience there. And then it'll just be interesting to see, does that matter? Guys that have played a lot of football, but are they ready to face the beast that will be Sean Clifford and the Nittany Lions? So, I have a tendency to talk in monotone, but my brother, I am hyped for Thursday. I am ready to roll. Let's get this show on the road. Got my YouTube TV 4K package coming in hot. So, it is going to be in 4K, just so everyone knows. I did check that out, so let's go.
I really could not be more excited for what's going to happen. If you are in Columbus, Ohio, and you would like to watch this football game with myself and an Ohio Bobcat, let me know. You will get to see me at my absolute worst. Only other thing I want to say is that there is currently nothing on the board right now, but if odds are put out there for North Dakota against Nebraska, hammer the Fighting Hawks to cover over that clown shoes football team in Lincoln. And I can't think of another better way to end this podcast than by slandering the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roars. Always make sure you're subscribing wherever you go to get your podcasts. And if you're going on something like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. Make sure you're following us on all of our various social media channels. And one last time, I want to thank Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this edition of the pod. For first-time customers, use the promo code ROARLIONSROAR, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. One last time, thank you very much for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For Craig Fritz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Go State.